in the heart of Westminster in London, in the shadow of the Tate Gallery, which is one of the best known of the picture galleries in London. In fact, it is the place where all the new art comes. My sister Alice, who is 5 years younger than I, she was also born in the same place, Westminster, where I was born. So we have 3 brothers. I was the eldest, then came a brother, then my sister Alice, and then 2 more brothers. Because we were the only 2 sisters, we were close together, and somehow as we grew up, we had the same thoughts and ways of looking at things, and somehow maybe we were more sensitive to things. I don't know what it was, but we became rebels in the family as compared with the sons. The sons were more conservative in their views, but we somehow went towards the left. We were interested in new thoughts, new ideas. We were interested in people of other countries, which at that time was rather unusual in England, particularly if you were in sympathy with coloured races and with problems of the Jews. This was considered unusual and slightly shocking at the time when we were young. So when we left school and did courses which fitted us for taking up careers in commercial life or offices, anything of that sort. Somehow I wanted to go into a publishing company. In any case, we were already interested in publishing and book selling because our father had a bookshop, which from the beginning made us interested in reading of books and selling of books and publishing of books. I went into the well-known firm of George Allen and Unwin, which was known for publishing books on India and India's problems, and some of the most famous writers on India were authors of George Allen and Unwin. Then my sister finished her education, and she took a job in the firm of W.H. Smith and Company, which was the biggest booksellers and distributors of those days in London, with branches in many countries overseas. So because of the places in which we were working and our contacts with new thought as coming from new published books, we became interested in leftist politics, leftist movements, and we became interested in meeting people of developing countries, people who were politically unfree, as you would call it. And somehow that brought us into contact with students from India. And both of us met regularly students who were from India and who were studying in Cambridge, Oxford, London University, who later on became leaders of their day in India and in Pakistan. My sister also worked with Krishna Menon when he was campaigning for election in London. She helped him in his voting campaign. When I was about 24, then I met my husband. He was a student in Cambridge University, and the pupil of his tutor was Sir Arthur Quiller Coote, the well-known writer and literary critic. And somehow we automatically took a liking to one another and decided we would be engaged. My husband came back to what was then India to take up a job and to leave me to decide finally about making up my mind to marry him. He wouldn't let me give a decision while we were together because he said we should both be emotionally involved and might not take a cool, calm, clear decision. And what I was doing was a very important step, giving up my own cultural pattern, parents, country, and coming to a completely new setup. And therefore, I should make a decision in a cool, calm, collected manner when he was away from me and not with me. And for this reason, he went back after taking his degree from Cambridge and left me in London to make up my mind. Well, of course, in those days it was quite unusual for an English girl to marry an Indian, and people got quite concerned over it. So quite a number of people did their best to persuade me not to come, but my mind was made up, and so to me it made no difference. My parents also were very fine about it. My husband took the old traditional way, which is common in this country, of going to the parents first. He went to my parents first and said that we wish to get married and could he have their permission, which of course was, from their point of view, quite an unusual thing to do, and very much flattered them and made them feel very happy that he came to them first before the two of us made a firm decision. So although they said we would rather you married and stayed in your own country, where we have the pleasure of keeping you with us and your husband and having grandchildren and so on, but it's your decision. If this is what you want and this is what will make you happy, then of course we have no objections. That also was an unusual thing in those days for English parents to make no objection to their daughter marrying what was after all someone from a coloured race. So in that way my parents were a very unusual type. My brothers weren't so unusual. They were more prejudiced because, as I said, they somehow went a different way from my sister and I. They were more conservative and traditional in their outlook, whereas we were, you might say, rebel class. So when I came in 1936 to India to be married, in the meantime, Dr. Iqbal, who was a great friend of my husband's and who in the beginning had persuaded him to go to Cambridge to take a degree, he was so pleased that my husband had finally made up his mind to get married that he said he would be the Qazi at our marriage and he would make up our Nikah Nama. He consulted all the prominent lawyers in Lahore at that time and made up what he thought was the ideal contract, keeping in view the fact that in his opinion a large hakmeh was degrading for a girl. It was a sort of bargain, financial bargain, which he didn't approve of. So these particular points he made in our Nikah Nama. He made up the contract, a draft in his own handwriting, which I still have with me, corrections and so on. And then when the Nikah Nama was finally completed, he was one of the signatories to it, and he was also the Qazi in our marriage. The things he emphasized were that as I was leaving my own cultural pattern, my parents' country, everything for my husband coming to a new setup, new country, therefore all the advantages would be on my side, as I had to make the biggest adjustment. So therefore, one condition was that while married to me, my husband should not marry any other woman of whatsoever persuasion. Number two was, right of divorce should be with me and not with my husband. And number three was that the hakmeh should be very small, something nominal. In my case it was to be enough so that if the marriage didn't prove successful, I would be able to go back to England. So at that time he put down the sum of 2,000 rupees, which was to cover the cost of travelling from what was then India back to England, which was my home. Those were the things he put into the contract. It was a very simple one. But as I say, he didn't believe in monetary bargaining. He thought it should be the simplest possible contract on either side, so that both parties had a sort of dignified marriage. This was his strong point.
Now, your impressions about Faiz when you met him first, before they were married?
So Faiz was a very young man when we first met him. He was a lecturer in MAO College, Amritsar, where my husband was principal. That was the job my husband took up when he came back, principal of MAO College in Amritsar. So we had a very fine group of people there in those days. In those days, of course, it was difficult for Muslims to get jobs, at least in the Punjab, because the British kept this quota system for jobs, Hindus, Muslims, and somehow all the fat, good jobs went to Hindus, and there was practically no place left for Muslims. So those who were employed anywhere had very high qualifications. All the young men teaching in that college had qualifications from London School of Economics and Oxford and Cambridge. And they were all people who later on became quite famous in their own way. So Fez was a lecturer there, just a young man, so to say, and almost one might say, like my husband thought of him as a younger brother. So he was always in our house. He was unmarried, of course, then, and living with his mother. His mother was a widow. And he spent a lot of time in our house. And he was just like a younger brother, affectionate and helping us and we helping him. And all the time sitting together, discussing together. He writing poems, my husband writing poems, friends coming and listening to their poems, impromptu musha'iras being organized. It was really intellectually a very active time in those days, because all those young men, as I say, were very highly qualified and intelligent, and we didn't have artificial amusements in those days, like television, lots of cinemas, theatre, and so on. Whatever amusements or intellectual activities you had to be done yourself. So we formed a discussion group, and we used to make our own mashairas. All sorts of things we did were done by ourselves. So it was quite a lifetime in that way. And then young people were interested in, of course, in India's becoming politically free. So that there was a very active communist group in Lahore of young intellectuals, people from very high-placed families. They used to come backwards, forwards. There would be discussions with them, exchange of views. And Fez was involved in all that, along with my husband, myself. And then after a year or two, my sister came from England. So she also was involved. So it was a very happy time and a very live time in those days for all four of us.
Now a few words about Alice and Fez before they got married.
Well, originally...
When did you come to know that Fez was interested in Alice or vice versa?
Well, you might say that it began as a joke. His mother had been trying to get him to marry for some years, and he'd always refused. He just wasn't interested in an ordinary sort of marriage to a girl he hadn't seen before, which his mother envisaged. His mother was keen to get him placed because she also was a widow. So far she hadn't been able to catch him as regards the marriage market. We used to joke with him that Alice is coming, and of course we're going to put you two together and you're going to make a match of it. Just a sort of joke, you see, nothing more than that. Then when she did come, actually she came for 1 year. She had decided to take 1 year's leave and come and spend 1 year with us. But somehow when she came, she liked it so much, also because of her background, that she, like me, was already interested in India as a country and India's getting political freedom from British imperialism. So from that point of view, she was interested in what was happening in the country. Things were boiling up at that time towards an independence movement, and she liked being here so much that she decided she wouldn't go back to a humdrum existence in London. She would prefer to stay, and therefore she took up a job in high school in Amritsar. I think it was Victoria Girls High School in the Hall Bazaar. She took up a teaching job there and stayed on, and then of course, because Fez was always in our house, every day in our house, chatting, discussing with us, so they came very much in contact, and after some months they decided seriously, apart from our joking beforehand, decided seriously that they would like to marry. But Fez's mother was entirely against it. She was an old-fashioned orthodox type. She wanted the usual orthodox sort of dulhan for her son, who would look after her, need her when she was tired, sit by her side and so on, and just be her handmaiden, more or less, and nothing else. She didn't at all like the idea of having a woman of independent views with independent existence. Somehow it didn't appeal to her at all, unlike my mother-in-law, who was quite different. She had said when my husband finally, when he came back and said that he now wanted to get married, something which no one had been able to make him do before, he was just happy that Kodako Shukr Beta, now you've made up your mind, and I'm very happy, and what is she like, and so on. She had no feelings that it must be somebody whom I think is suitable. He was just happy that he had found someone who was suitable from his point of view. Whereas Fez's mother was, being, I suppose, a widow and having had to bring up the children from the time they were young, and being the master in the family, she had probably imposed her views more on her children than otherwise might have been the case. So she had her own strong views about what she wanted. So she didn't welcome the idea of a Western daughter-in-law at all. And she was against the marriage for some years, and in the meantime tried to persuade Fez to marry other girls. She produced other girls who she thought were suitable, but Fez was quite determined and held out. She said, either I marry Alice or I don't marry at all. So after 2 or 3 years like that, of his holding out and she trying to dissuade him, she finally came to the conclusion that she had to accept the situation and had to agree to the marriage. So then she gave way gracefully, and the marriage took place in Srinagar. My husband had taken up an appointment as principal of the Sri Pratap College in Srinagar, and Alice and Fez came there in October 1944. And that time we hadn't been allotted a house. We were given accommodation in a palace, the old Maharani's palace, by the side of the river. It was a huge, grand place, full of halls and enormous rooms and courtyards. So it was a very grand setting for a marriage also. So the marriage took place in that old palace by the side of the river, and Sheikh Abdullah was the Qazi, the famous Kashmir leader. He was the Qazi for Alice and Fez in their marriage.
Any other thing regarding the marriage, the ceremonies, etc. at that time? Was it a simple marriage?
It was very simple, just like ours. And maybe because of our example, or rather I should say Dr. Iqbal's firmness in the type of nikah nama he thought was suitable, they also had much the same sort of thing, a very simple nikah nama with no big demands on either side, either for bari or for hakmer. It's just simple. Of course it was grand in that way that there were a huge number of people, mostly Kashmiris of course, some friends, lots of friends also came from Lahore, Karachi, Josh Maliabadi was there, and a number of poets, old friends of Fez's and my husband's and so on. They all came to celebrate the marriage. It was also a trip for them, to come to Srinagar from Lahore, other places, coming to that grand climate. So it was, in that way, a very enjoyable marriage, with so many people coming from different places to celebrate it along with Fez and Alice. They were very happy that finally what they wanted had happened.
How was Fez dressed when he got married? Did he put on a suit or a sherwani or achkan?
Really, I don't remember, but it must have been an achkan, because in those days that's what was worn. I know my husband wore an achkan because he used to live and die in kurta pajama achkan. He always avoided Western suits. In fact, soon after we were married, he got an evening suit made to wear at dinner parties, and he didn't ever once wear it. After his death, I just gave it away to somebody. He'd never worn it even, because he disapproved of Western fashions. He preferred indigenous cloth and traditional clothes.
Dr. Taseer's impressions about Fez as a poet, as a writer, as a young man, as a teacher. Do you remember it?
Well, I mean, of course he knew he was a very promising young man. That of course he knew. And he used to encourage him. And I mean, Fez's talent was something special. The way in which he wrote was not as my husband wrote. That was something special, which my husband recognized. And he knew he had a very sensitive mind, and that he was, from the beginning, politically motivated, very strong convictions, leftist convictions, that he also had from the beginning, because he was in the company also of people who were like that from the time he started teaching. And he was, of course, a dedicated teacher because he had a sensitive mind and had a love for young people also. which made him a good teacher. He wanted to inspire young people with the ideas and convictions which he had himself, which meant that he did teach them well because he was sincere in what he was putting across.